In a world, there was Ilya and Azra, and now that we have a van plan and a 3D model, we know exactly what we want to do. Since the boring part with the styrofoam on the sides is done, we can get to the rigid board, ceiling, and floor, which is hopefully going to be a lot funner. Welcome to Vanlifia.
Guys, big deal today, huge deal. Maybe the biggest since we bought the actual van, because today we're picking up all the plywood, all the OSB board, all the things that are going to make up the entire interior of the van. Super excited. Not a product placement, but this company has been really nice, really professional, and helped with all my questions as a noob. Now we just have to go around back and pick it all up. So all the loading's done, and now we're off to the beautiful Pegasus Ranch, where all the magic will be happening in the next couple of weeks, months, probably months, maybe not even a few. And so we made it to the paradise that is Pegasus, the little horsey ranch where I spent many years of my life. I took them to my club. This is where I usually come several times a week when I can, to ride, to hang out, be around the horses, do awesome stuff like that.
Yeah, so that kid with the wannabe Matrix sunglasses is me over 5 years ago when I was volunteering a lot at the Pegasus Ranch, which is an amazing little piece of paradise on earth with horses and all kinds of activities for kids, where I learned to ride and grew a passion for everything from mountain climbing and mountaineering to just traveling and survival and minimalism and pretty much everything which brought us down here to this van life journey. To make a long story short, they've become my family, my second home, a place I just love to be in whenever I get the chance, which is unfortunately not so often anymore, but to me it's very symbolic that the van life journey began here, and a huge thanks to my Pegasus family for hosting us and just being the awesomest people in the world. As soon as we clean this out, we will be witnessing the biggest transformation since the purchase of this van, and that's the main board coming out between the cockpit and the body. The final screw is leaving. Oh my god, that looks so weird. It's gonna be a while getting used to this. Now the real question is, can we get in and out of the cockpit through the back without going to the front? Because, you know, urban camping and safety and things like that. This definitely seemed easier in my head. I made it. It's a possibility. Hey Zen. Hey lovely little bear. What's up? How you doing? How you doing? Yeah? You like it in here? Nah? This'll be our new home, bro. Yeah? And I hope to have a Malinois just like you. You beautiful little beast. Stop scratching my floors. Okay, so we can finally start on the floor with the XPS rigid board here. But obviously right off the bat we have weird corners like this. So instead of eyeballing it, there's this cool thing that I learned on the internet as I was researching all this. You find the deepest end here, take a pixel, and you start tracing the border like so, keeping the pencil as straight as possible. This is not very scientific. There are tools for this, so you can precisely get the angle you're looking for, but we don't have those tools. And anyway, this is just an estimate. So we'll obviously cut it extra close and then kind of adapt as we go. So here's our first cut. It's off by like 1 centimeter, but it's good. I just finalize the edges and make sure it has a nice fit. So after a lot of trial and fails, we got a cut that fits pretty neatly.
So with the floor done and all, we're moving on to the ceiling. But the ceiling is obviously upside down, so you can't just stick it on and hope it stays, unlike the floor, so you have to glue it. In order to glue it, you have to apply pressure. So I created this contraption with all the pulls we use for the floor. The ceiling is the most crooked part, by the way. It's been a pain to cut it out and make it fit. And then I shoved all these pulls here to keep it up as it's drying. And we have to do this one by one because I don't have it anymore. Wood. Look at that amazing contraption. As we wait for these ceiling panels to dry properly, which is taking its time because it's pretty cold, let's talk about the next element of insulation. There's a term called thermal bridging. It is when two things that are touching are passing on the temperature from one to the other. So despite all these levels of insulation that we're going to have, the wood needs to be attached to something. It cannot be attached to insulation. Like all the interiors, the carpentry, the paneling has to be attached to something firm. So you have to leave pieces like this out, which is where we're going to have ribs to which everything else is attached. The problem is when the wood is touching the metal, it very quickly picks up on the temperature. So for example, it's cold outside, and now this piece of wood is an isolator, but very bad one. So it's not as cold as this metal panel underneath, but it is much colder than this insulation. So to prevent thermal bridging, we're gonna put a tiny piece of this 2mm thin subflooring material, which is probably some kind of polyiso, similar in material to these rigid boards and stuff. That's gonna go between the metal and the wood that's attached to it to at least give it a little bit of insulation. And it's also going to cover weird areas like that. Despite the insulation inside, this part is still cold, so it needs to have something covering it to keep it warm. But it's not going to be revealed, so we can do it green. Whereas areas like this, which are going to be seen even in the final version, we'll find some kind of nice material to go on top and cover all this. The great news is it's thin and flexible, so I can literally just cut it with scissors and make it fit any shape that's needed. And we're gonna use this spray adhesive. I'm not gonna like spray everything, because remember, I want to keep this van as intact as possible. So even the roof panels, I only glued with like dots, like little peas of silicone in different areas, so it's stays on pretty firmly, but if needed, it can come off. It's a really tough balance to keep. And the last piece of the insulation puzzle is this roll of tinfoil behind me, which is essentially an Eastern European ripoff of Reflectix, if you ever heard of that. Essentially, it's astrofoil on one side, which is what they use in mountain rescue services, firemen, things like that. I think it's called like radiothermal insulation. So it reflects light and at the same time reflects heat, which is an extra level of protection, which maybe this rigid board doesn't do. And then on the other side, you got bubble wrap. Not sure how much that is the industry standard, but it's something because it creates a little gap of air for this whole insulation piece to breathe, making it more efficient, because as we know, when it's all bunched up, it's not effective, and also air itself is a good insulator. Now I've seen some people use Reflectix as a vapor barrier as well, like connecting the strips with tape and trying to get it really airtight. But as we already concluded from some other people, it's nearly impossible to make an airtight vapor barrier, which means it's better to let all the insulation breathe so that when it gets wet and moist, it can air out, as opposed to trapping the moisture inside, which then it can't get out if you have an imperfect vapor barrier. So I won't be taping them together. I'll just place them and leave little cracks so that it covers 99.9% of the surface, but still has place for air to get in and out. So I'm cutting out the pieces I need and putting them to size, making sure that it goes a little bit above the floorboard, which is gonna go here. But I'm not gluing it down or taping it down or anything, because the floor will do that for me.